The wind came down from the mountains like a living thing, hungry and cold, stripping whatever warmth remained from the valley. It rattled the loose boards on Ethan Cole's barn, whispered through gaps in the fence line, and carried with it the promise of an early winter, the kind that buried hope along with the land. Ethan stood in the doorway of his ranch house, coffee gone cold in his hands, watching the sky turn the color of old bruises. 28 years old, and he felt twice that. The ranch had been in his family for 3 generations, but it would die with him if things didn't change. The cattle were sold off months ago. The hayfields sat fallow, and the bank's letters were stacking up on the kitchen table, each one a polite variation of the same threat. He'd thought about walking away. Some morning, standing in this exact spot, he'd imagined just getting in his truck and driving until the fuel ran out. Start over somewhere that didn't carry the weight of his father's expectations and his brother's ghost. But leaving wasn't in him. Stupid loyalty, maybe. Or just stubbornness that ran deeper than sense. The sound of an engine pulled him from his thoughts. A beat-up Civic turned off the highway, kicking up dust as it crawled down the long driveway. Ethan didn't get many visitors. The few neighbors he had left kept their distance, not out of hostility, but out of respect for a man clearly drowning who didn't want a hand. The car stopped near the house. The driver killed the engine but didn't get out right away. Ethan watched through the steam of his breath as the door finally opened and a woman emerged. She was heavy-set, wearing layers that looked slept in, her dark hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. She moved carefully, like someone navigating ice even though the ground was dry. When she looked toward the house, her eyes didn't quite meet his. They landed somewhere near his shoulder, then dropped to the ground. "Help you?" Ethan called out. The woman flinched at his voice. Just a little, but he caught it. "I'm here about the job," she said. Her voice was quiet, roughened by either cold or disuse. "The posting at the diner. Said you needed kitchen help." Ethan had forgotten about that. 2 weeks ago, in a moment of desperate optimism, he'd put up a notice at Lonnie's diner in town. He'd been thinking he could hire someone cheap to help prep meals, maybe do some cleaning, make the place feel less like a tomb. But that was before the bank's latest letter, before he'd done the math and realized he was maybe 6 weeks from foreclosure. "Position's probably filled," he lied, already turning back toward the house. "It's not." Something in her tone made him stop. Not defiance exactly, more like resignation. The voice of someone who'd heard a lot of doors close. He turned back. She was still looking at the ground, hands shoved deep in her coat pockets. "How do you know?" "I called the diner. They said you hadn't taken the notice down. Said you hadn't called anybody back." She finally looked up, and for just a second their eyes met. Hers were brown, tired, carrying the kind of weight that had nothing to do with her body. "I can cook, I can clean. I work hard and I don't need much. Can't pay much either. Room and board. 100 a week if you can spare it, 75 if you can't." Ethan studied her. There was something off. Not wrong exactly, but careful. Like she was holding herself together with wire and willpower. "You got references?" She hesitated. "No." "Where'd you work before?" Another pause. "Restaurants, diners mostly. Moved around a lot." "Why? Does it matter?" The question hung between them, carried off by the wind. Ethan knew he should send her away. He didn't need another mouth to feed, didn't need complications. He needed money and time, neither of which this woman could provide. But there was something about the way she stood there, braced, waiting for rejection like it was inevitable, that touched something in him he'd thought was dead. "You run from the law?" "No." "You got problems that are going to land on my doorstep?" She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I hope not." "Honest, at least. Or honest enough. What's your name?" "Mara Vance." Ethan drained the cold coffee, grimaced, and nodded toward the house. "Come on, then. Let's see if you can actually cook." The kitchen was cleaner than most bachelor setups, but far from organized. Dishes in the sink, mail on the counter, a frying pan that hadn't been properly scrubbed in weeks. Mara took it all in with a quick, practiced glance. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" she asked. Ethan leaned against the door frame. "Define real." Something that didn't come out of a can or a freezer. He thought about it. June, maybe. It was October. Mara moved through the kitchen with surprising efficiency, opening cabinets in the refrigerator, taking stock. Her movements were economical, nothing wasted. She found eggs, some tired-looking vegetables, half a stick of butter, and some cheese that was close to turning. You got bread? Pantry. She worked in silence, and Ethan found himself watching. There was something almost meditative about the way she moved, cracking eggs, dicing vegetables, heating the pan. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Like cooking was the one place she felt certain. 20 minutes later, she slid a plate across the counter, scrambled eggs, peppers, and onions folded in, a piece of toast he hadn't asked for. Ethan took a bite. The eggs were perfect, fluffy, seasoned just right. The vegetables still had some bite. Simple food done well. "This'll do," he said. She almost smiled. Almost. "So I got the job?" He should say no. Should cut this off before it started. But the eggs were good, and the kitchen felt less empty with someone else in it, and he was so goddamn tired of being alone. Trial period, 2 weeks. You get the spare room upstairs, meals, and $75 a week. You don't work out, you leave quiet. Deal? Deal. They shook on it. Her hand was small in his, the grip firm but brief. She pulled away quickly, like touching another person was something she had to ration. "I'll get my things," she said. Ethan watched her go, then looked down at the empty plate. He had a feeling he'd just made either the best decision of his life or the worst. The line between the two had always been thinner than people wanted to admit. Mara's belongings fit in 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box. Ethan helped her carry them upstairs to the spare room, a small space with a single bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the north pasture. "Bathroom's down the hall," he said. "Hot water's temperamental. Give it a minute to warm up." "Thank you." He nodded and left her to settle in. Downstairs, he tried to focus on the books, the endless calculations that never came out in his favor, but his mind kept drifting to the woman upstairs. There was a story there. A bad one, probably. People didn't end up on dying ranches in the middle of nowhere without a reason, but everyone deserved a chance to outrun their past. Even if Ethan didn't believe it was possible, he could at least give her the space to try. Well, the first few days fell into a rhythm. Mara was up before dawn, coffee already brewing by the time Ethan came downstairs. She cooked breakfast without being asked, nothing fancy but filling and hot. She cleaned quietly, fixed things he'd stopped noticing were broken, and kept to herself. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, and even then her answers were brief. She didn't ask about his life, didn't pry into why a man his age was running a failing ranch alone. In return, he didn't push her, but he noticed things. The way she positioned herself in any room so she could see the doors. The way she startled at sudden sounds. A truck backfiring, a door slamming. The careful long sleeves even when the kitchen got hot. And the bruises. He saw the first one on the 4th day. She was reaching for a high cabinet, and her sleeve rode up, revealing a yellowing mark on her forearm, finger-shaped, unmistakable. She caught him looking and pulled the sleeve down quickly, her face going carefully blank. Ethan didn't say anything. Wasn't his business. Plenty of people carried marks from their past, but it settled in his gut like bad food, and he found himself watching her more carefully. On Friday, he drove into town for supplies. Lonnie's Diner sat on Main Street, a fixture of Red Creek for as long as anyone could remember. Ethan slid into a booth and ordered coffee. Lonnie herself brought it over, a woman in her 60s with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Heard you hired someone," she said, pouring. "Small towns. Information moves faster than the wind. Word gets around. Mara Vance." Lonnie set the pot down, crossed her arms. "She came through here about a week ago. Quiet, nervous, asked if anyone was hiring. She's a good cook." "I'm sure she is." Lonnie's voice carried a note of warning. "But you know anything about her? Know she needed work, know I needed help." "Ethan." Lonnie sat down across from him, her voice dropping. "I've known you since you were yay high. Your daddy would have done the same thing, helped someone who needed it. But that woman's running from something. Aren't we all?" "Not like that. Jimmy Hollis saw her at the gas station. Said she had a black eye she was trying to cover with makeup. Said she looked over her shoulder every 30 seconds like someone was coming for her. Ethan wrapped his hands around the coffee mug. She tell you any of this? Didn't have to. I've seen enough women pass through here over the years to recognize the signs. Lonnie leaned forward. I'm not saying send her away, I'm saying be careful. If she's running from a man, and I'd bet money she is, he might come looking. If he does, I'll handle it. With what? Good intentions? Lonnie shook her head. You're a good man, Ethan Cole, but you're not a fighter. Your brother was the fighter. You're the one who tried to fix things. The mention of his brother landed like a punch. Jackson had been dead 3 years, killed in a car accident that still didn't make sense. Ethan had spent those years trying to keep the ranch alive, trying to honor a legacy that felt heavier every day. I'll be careful, he said finally. Lonnie sighed and stood up. Just don't let your kindness make you stupid. When Ethan got back to the ranch, Mara had dinner ready. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the meat so tender it fell apart. They ate at the kitchen table, the silence comfortable enough. Lonnie says hello, Ethan said. Mara's fork paused halfway to her mouth. You talked about me. Town talks, can't stop that. She set the fork down, her appetite clearly gone. What did she say? Ethan considered lying, decided against it. Said you looked like you were running from something. Said I should be careful. Mara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I'll leave in the morning. Sit down. I don't want to bring trouble, but sit down. The command in his voice surprised them both. Mara hesitated, then slowly sank back into her chair. Ethan put down his own fork. I'm not kicking you out, but if there's something I should know, something that might show up here, I need to hear it. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her plate. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. His name is Silas. Silas Vance. We were married for 5 years. She touched her arm absently where he'd seen the bruises. He hurt me. A lot. I tried to leave before, but he always found me. Always brought me back. How'd you get away this time? I waited until he was on a 3-day hunting trip, packed what I could carry. Drove until the car almost died, then picked the smallest, most remote place I could find on the map. She looked up at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Red Creek wasn't an accident. I chose it because I thought no one would think to look here. And if he does look, then I run again. Ethan leaned back in his chair. He should feel angry, or at least wary. She'd brought danger to his doorstep without warning, but all he felt was a deep, tired sadness. How long do you plan on running? As long as it takes. That's not a life, Mara. It's the only one I have. The resignation in her voice was worse than fear. This was someone who'd accepted their fate, who'd stopped believing in alternatives. Ethan stood and started clearing the dishes. You can stay, for now. But if this Silas shows up, we deal with it, together. I'm not letting you face that alone. Why? The question came out broken. Why would you do that? He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who'd forgotten what it meant to have someone stand with them instead of over them. Because running's no way to live, and because everyone deserves a place to stand their ground. Mara's breath hitched. She nodded once, unable to speak. That night, lying in bed, Ethan stared at the ceiling and wondered what he'd gotten himself into. He'd made a promise to a woman he barely knew, against a threat he couldn't measure. But the ranch was dying anyway. If he was going down, maybe it meant something to go down fighting for someone besides himself. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Mara settled in, and the ranch started feeling less like a graveyard. She organized the kitchen, patched holes in his work shirts, even started a small herb garden in the window. Small things, but they added up to something that felt like home. Ethan found himself looking forward to mornings, to the smell of coffee and the quiet companionship of shared meals. They talked more. Never about anything heavy, just the small observations that fill space between people. Mara had a sharp eye for detail, a dry sense of humor that surprised him. She smiled sometimes now. Never freely, but it was there. One evening, he came in from fixing fence and found her in the living room, a fire going in the hearth. She'd found the old photo albums he'd boxed up after his brother died. Sorry, she said quickly, closing the album. It's fine. He sat down on the couch, and after a moment, she reopened it. The photos were from better years. His father standing proud in front of the barn, his mother in the garden, Jackson on horseback, grinning like he owned the world. "Your brother?" Mara asked, pointing to Jackson. "Yeah. He looks like you. He was better at everything. Better rider, better rancher, better son." Ethan's voice was flat. "I was supposed to go to college, become an accountant or something. He was supposed to run this place. Then he wrapped his truck around a tree, and here I am." "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." They sat in silence, turning pages. Should have been depressing, but somehow it wasn't. There was something comforting about sharing old ghosts with someone who understood loss. "Thank you," Mara said softly. "For what?" "For not making me feel like a problem." Ethan looked at her. In the firelight, she looked younger, softer, like maybe the person she'd been before the world got to her. "You're not a problem, Mara. You're just a person who got dealt a bad hand." "So are you." He smiled despite himself. "Yeah, so maybe we make a good pair." The words hung in the air, meaning more than either of them was ready to acknowledge. The first snow came in early November, light flurries that wouldn't stick but signaled what was coming. Ethan was in the barn when he heard the truck. Not his, not Mara's Civic. Something bigger, heavier. He walked out into the yard and felt his stomach drop. The truck was new, expensive. A black Ford F250 with tinted windows. It idled in the driveway, engine rumbling like a threat. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of build that came from hard work and harder living. His hair was dark, cut short, and his face was all sharp angles and cold eyes. He wore a canvas jacket and jeans, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd never had to back down. "Help you?" Ethan called out. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Looking for my wife. Heard she might be working here." Everything in Ethan went cold. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." The man took a few steps closer. "Mara, about 5'6", dark hair, probably told you some story about needing work. She's got a way of making people feel sorry for her. Nobody here by that name." The man's smile widened. "Now, I know that's not true. See, I stopped at the diner in town. Nice lady there, Lonnie. She was real helpful. Told me all about how you'd hired someone matching my wife's description. Even mentioned she seemed nervous." Ethan's hand drifted toward his pocket, where he kept a folding knife. Not much of a weapon, but it was something. "You need to leave. I need to see my wife." The man's voice hardened. "She's confused. Sick, maybe. Needs to come home so I can take care of her. From what I hear, your kind of care isn't the healing type." That got a reaction. The man's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists. "You don't know a damn thing about me or my marriage." "I know enough." They stared at each other, the air crackling with tension. Ethan was outweighed, outmatched, and probably outgunned, but he held his ground. Finally, the man stepped back. "Tell her I came by. Tell her I'm staying at the motel in town. And tell her she's got 48 hours to come home on her own, or I start making things difficult for the people helping her." He climbed back into his truck and reversed down the driveway, kicking up gravel and dust. Ethan stood there long after the truck disappeared, his heart hammering. When he turned back toward the house, Mara was standing in the doorway. Her face was white, her hands shaking. "He found me," she whispered. "Yeah." Ethan walked over, stopped a few feet away. "But he's not taking you." "You don't understand. Silas doesn't make empty threats. He'll hurt you. He'll burn this place down if he has to. Let him try." "Ethan, I meant what I said before. You're not facing this alone." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. "We're going to figure this out. Together." Mara looked up at him, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he saw something besides fear in her eyes. Hope. Fragile, tentative, but there. "Okay," she said. "Together." They stood in the doorway as the first real snow began to fall. Two people who'd stopped running and chosen to make a stand. Neither of them knew if they'd survive it. But for the first time in a long time, they both had something worth fighting for. That night, neither of them slept. Ethan sat in the living room with his father's old Winchester across his lap, watching the driveway through the window. Every set of headlights on the distant highway made his pulse spike. Every creak of the house settling felt like a threat. Mara stayed in the kitchen, cleaning things that were already clean, her movements mechanical and precise. Around midnight, Ethan found her scrubbing the same section of counter for the third time, her knuckles white around the sponge. "You should get some rest," he said. She didn't look up. "Can't. When's the last time you slept through the night?" "Before I married him." The sponge stopped moving. "That's not entirely true. The first year was good. He was charming, attentive. Everyone loved him. I thought I'd won the lottery." Her laugh was bitter. "Then I burned dinner one night. Just overcooked a roast. He didn't yell, didn't even raise his voice. He just looked at me with this disappointment, like I'd revealed something rotten in myself. And I apologized, spent an hour apologizing for a piece of meat." Ethan pulled out a chair, sat down, listening. It got worse slowly. So slowly I didn't notice. The disappointment turned to anger. The anger turned to control. What I wore, who I talked to, where I went. And when I didn't follow the rules that changed every day, he'd remind me. With his fists, mostly, sometimes other ways. She finally looked at him, her eyes dry but haunted. The worst part wasn't the pain. It was how he made me believe I deserved it. That if I was just better, smarter, more careful, he wouldn't have to hurt me. That's not how it works. I know that now. But when you're in it, when someone's breaking you down piece by piece, you start to believe anything, just to make it stop. She set the sponge down. I tried to leave 4 times. Twice he caught me before I made it out of town. Once I made it to a shelter 3 states over. He found me in 2 weeks. Convinced the staff I was mentally ill, that he was worried sick, that he just wanted to help me. They believed him. Everyone always believes him. What about the police? Tried that too. Filed 3 reports. He's a volunteer firefighter, coaches Little League, the kind of man who helps old ladies with their groceries. Every time I reported him, he'd show up with character witnesses. His version was always that I was unstable, jealous, making things up for attention. She touched her arm, the bruises hidden under long sleeves. Even when I had marks, he had explanations. I bruise easily. I'm clumsy. And you know what? After a while, I started to wonder if maybe he was right. Maybe I was the problem. Ethan felt anger building in his chest, not at her, but at a system that had failed her over and over, at a man who'd weaponized kindness to hide cruelty. "You're not the problem, Mara. You never were. He's going to kill me eventually. You understand that, right? This isn't going to end with him giving up and going home. Silas doesn't lose, ever." Her voice cracked. "And now you're in the middle of it, because I was selfish enough to stay when I should have kept running." "You're not selfish. You're tired. There's a difference. Tired people make mistakes, and mistakes around Silas get people hurt." Ethan stood, moved to the window. Outside, snow was falling harder now, coating everything in white. "Tomorrow we go see Sheriff Hastings. Tell him everything. Get a restraining order. That won't stop him." "Maybe not, but it's a start. And we're going to tell the neighbors too. Make sure everyone knows he's here and why." "You're going to make yourself a target." "I made myself a target the second I let you stay. Might as well own it." He turned back to her. "You said you ran 4 times. 5th time's the charm, right? Except this time you're not running. You're standing still, and everyone who tries to drag you back is going to have to go through people who give a damn." Mara's breath hitched. She covered her face with her hands, and her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Not from fear, but from something bigger. Relief, maybe. Or the overwhelming weight of not being alone anymore. Ethan gave her space, staring out at the snow and wondering if he'd just signed both their death warrants or made the first right choice in 3 years. The morning brought 6 inches of fresh snow and a sense of urgency that sat heavy in Ethan's gut. They drove into Red Creek just after dawn, the road slick and treacherous. The sheriff's office sat on the north end of Main Street, a squat brick building that had seen better decades. Sheriff Tom Hastings was pushing 60, with the kind of weathered face that came from a lifetime of dealing with other people's problems. He looked up when they entered, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to concern when he saw Mara's face. "Ethan, Miss, He gestured to the chairs across from his desk. What can I do for you? Ethan laid it out, all of it. Mara's history with Silas, the abuse, the failed attempts to escape, the restraining orders that hadn't worked. Hastings listened without interrupting, his jaw getting tighter with each detail. When Ethan finished, the sheriff leaned back in his chair. This Silas Vance, he the one staying at the Pines Motel? You know about him? Hard not to. He's been making the rounds, asking questions. Stopped by here yesterday, actually. Said his wife was missing, possibly suffering from mental health issues. Seemed real concerned. Hastings looked at Mara. I'm guessing his version differs from yours. Everything he tells you will be a lie, Mara said quietly. But it'll be a convincing one. Where'd you run from originally? Colorado. Before that, Nebraska. Hastings pulled out a notepad. You file reports in either state? Both. Nothing stuck. The sheriff sighed. Wyoming's got some of the strictest domestic violence laws in the country, but they're only as good as the evidence. You got medical records? Photos? Witnesses? I have hospital records from Nebraska. 2 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, concussion, all from separate incidents. Mara's voice was mechanical, like she was reading a grocery list. The wrist I told them I fell. The ribs I said was a car accident. The concussion actually was an accident. I hit my head on the kitchen counter when he shoved me, but I didn't tell them that part. Why not? Because the last time I told the truth, he convinced everyone I was lying, and when we got home, he made sure I understood the cost of embarrassing him. She met the sheriff's eyes. I have scars if you need to see them, but I'm guessing those won't mean much either. Hastings was quiet for a moment. I believe you, Miss Vance, I do. But belief and evidence are different things in the eyes of the law. We can file for a restraining order, get it expedited given the circumstances. But you need to understand, paper doesn't stop bullets, and men like this don't respect boundaries. So what do we do? Ethan asked. You document everything. Every time he shows up, every threat, every interaction. You call me immediately. And you don't, under any circumstances, engage with him alone. Either of you. Hastings pulled out some forms. I'll make some calls, reach out to the departments in Nebraska and Colorado, get copies of those prior reports, build a file. Meanwhile, you file this restraining order and I'll have a talk with Mr. Vance. Make it clear he's being watched. That'll just make him angrier, Mara said. Probably, but it puts him on notice that you're not alone this time. The sheriff's expression softened. I've been doing this job for 32 years. I've seen a lot of women in your position. Most of them didn't have someone willing to stand with them. Count yourself lucky there. Mara glanced at Ethan, something unreadable in her expression. I do. They spent 2 hours filling out paperwork, documenting dates and incidents. Mara's hand shook when she wrote about the worst moments, but she pushed through, her handwriting cramped and precise. When they finally finished, Hastings walked them to the door. One more thing, he said. You know how to shoot? Ethan nodded. Rifle, mostly. Some handgun. Get her trained and get her armed. Wyoming's a constitutional carry state. She's got the right to protect herself. He looked at Mara. I'm not saying you should have to. I'm saying the world we live in sometimes requires it. The drive back to the ranch was quiet. Halfway home, Mara spoke. You don't have to do this, you know. It's not too late to cut me loose. Yes, it is. Why? Ethan kept his eyes on the road. When my brother died, I spent 6 months trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with this ranch. It was his dream, not mine. Every day felt like I was wearing someone else's clothes, trying to fill boots that were never meant for me. And then one morning I woke up and realized I'd stopped living. I was just existing, going through motions, waiting for something to change. He glanced at her. You showing up changed things. Gave me something to care about besides keeping a dead man's dream alive. So no, it's not too late. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Mara looked out the window, and when she spoke, her voice was thick. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We've still got to survive this. News traveled fast in Red Creek. By evening, half the county knew about Silas Vance and why he was in town. Ethan's phone rang 6 times before dinner, neighbors checking in, offering help in the vague way people do when they're not sure what they're signing up for. The most surprising call came from Frank Holloway, who ran the ranch 3 miles west. Frank was in his 70s, a hard man who rarely spoke more than necessary, but his voice on the phone was firm. Heard you got trouble. Word gets around. This fella, he dangerous? Very. Frank was quiet for a moment. My granddaughter went through something similar. Husband put her in the hospital twice before she finally got away. Moved to Oregon, haven't seen her in 5 years. His voice roughened. I'll keep an eye on your place. See anything that don't look right, I'll call. And if you need more than that, you let me know. Frank, no arguments. Some things matter more than fence lines and property disputes. This is one of them. The call ended before Ethan could respond. By nightfall, he'd heard from 4 other neighbors, each offering variations of the same thing: eyes, backup. A sense that whatever was coming, he wouldn't face it alone. It should have been comforting. Instead, it made the weight of responsibility heavier. These people were putting themselves at risk for a woman they barely knew, on his say-so. Mara made dinner, chicken and dumplings that reminded Ethan of his mother's cooking. They ate at the kitchen table, the silence broken only by the wind rattling the windows. You're thinking too loud, Mara said, thinking about how many people I'm dragging into this. You're not dragging anyone, they're choosing to help. Because of me. If something happens, then it happens because Silas is a monster, not because you tried to do the right thing. She set down her fork. I've spent 5 years believing I was responsible for his actions, that if I was just better, quieter, smaller, he wouldn't hurt me. You know what that does to a person? It erases you, turns you into a ghost. Her eyes locked on his. Don't do that to yourself. Don't take responsibility for someone else's evil. Ethan wanted to argue, but the truth in her words cut too deep. They cleaned up together, falling into the rhythm they'd established over the past month. It felt normal, domestic, like maybe they were just 2 people sharing space instead of 2 people waiting for violence to find them. Around 10, Ethan stepped outside to check the perimeter. The snow had stopped, leaving everything crystalline and still. Beautiful, if you ignored the cold that bit through his coat within seconds. He was halfway to the barn when he saw the truck. It was parked on the road, just outside his property line. Black, idling. The same truck from before. Ethan's hand went to the pistol at his hip, a Glock 19 he'd started carrying after the sheriff's visit. He didn't draw it, but the weight was reassuring. The truck's headlights flicked on, high beams cutting through the darkness. Ethan stood his ground, squinting against the glare. After a long moment, the truck reversed, turned around, and drove off. A message. We know where you are. We're watching. We can come whenever we want. Ethan stood in the cold until the taillights disappeared, then returned to the house. Mara was at the window, her face pale. He's playing with us, she said. Let him play. He crosses that property line. He's mine. You don't know what he's capable of. Maybe not, but he doesn't know what I'm capable of either. Mara almost smiled at that. Almost. The next morning brought a visitor Ethan hadn't expected. A woman in her 40s climbed out of a sensible sedan, carrying a briefcase and an expression that meant business. She introduced herself as Sarah Chen, an attorney from Cheyenne who specialized in domestic violence cases. Sheriff Hastings called me, she explained, accepting the coffee Mara offered. Said you might need legal representation. I can't afford a lawyer, Mara said immediately. Good thing I'm not charging you. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, pulled out a stack of documents. I take about a dozen pro bono cases a year. Yours just became one of them. They spent the morning going over Mara's history again, Sarah taking notes with the efficiency of someone who'd heard too many stories like this. When they finished, she leaned back. Your restraining order should be approved within 48 hours. I'm also going to file a motion to have your previous reports from Nebraska, yes, and Colorado entered into evidence here. Build a pattern. Make it harder for him to claim this is all in your head. What about criminal charges? Ethan asked. That's trickier. Most of the abuse happened in other jurisdictions. We'd need those DAs to pursue charges, and frankly, given the history, I'm not optimistic. But we can try. She looked at Mara. The stronger play is civil. We sue him for damages, emotional distress, loss of earnings, medical costs. Hit him where it hurts, his wallet and his reputation. That'll make him furious, Mara whispered. Good. Angry people make mistakes, and we'll be ready when he does. Sarah's expression softened. I know this is terrifying, but you're not powerless anymore. You've got people in your corner. Use that. After Sarah left, Mara sat at the table for a long time, staring at the paperwork. I keep waiting to wake up. From what? This. People helping, caring. It doesn't feel real. Ethan sat down across from her. It's real. Maybe the world's not all broken. Maybe there's still enough good people to balance the bad ones. You really believe that? He thought about his brother, about the ranch dying under his watch, about all the ways life had disappointed him. But he also thought about Frank's call, about Sarah driving 3 hours to help a stranger, about Lonnie checking in every day. Yeah, he said, I think I do. The restraining order came through on Thursday. Sheriff Hastings delivered it personally, along with news that Silas had been served. How'd he take it? Ethan asked. About how you'd expect. Calm on the surface, but I could see the anger underneath. He's got a lawyer now, too, some slick guy from Denver. They're threatening to countersue for defamation. Can they do that? They can try. Won't get far, but it'll drag things out. Keep her tangled up in legal proceedings. Hastings shook his head. It's a control tactic. Can't control her physically anymore, so he'll control her through the courts. So what do we do? What you've been doing. Document everything, stay vigilant, and trust that the system, as broken as it is, still works more often than not. He pulled out a card. This is my personal cell. You see him within 100 yards of this property, you call. Don't wait, don't second guess. Just call. That night, Ethan taught Mara to shoot. They set up targets in the back pasture, old fence posts with paper plates stapled to them. The rifle was too big for her, kicked too hard, but she was a quick study. By the time darkness fell, she could hit center mass from 30 yards. The pistol was easier, Ethan's backup gun, a Smith & Wesson .38 revolver. Simple, reliable. No safety to fumble with. Mara's first shot went wide, but by the 10th she was grouping them tight. How does it feel? Ethan asked. She stared at the gun in her hands. Heavy. I meant emotionally. I know what you meant. She set the revolver down carefully. It feels like I'm becoming something I don't want to be. You're becoming someone who can protect herself. That's not the same as becoming him. Isn't it? Violence begets violence. That's what they say. They also say that refusing to defend yourself is just another way of dying. Ethan moved closer. Nobody's asking you to become a killer, Mara. But if it comes down to your life or his, I need to know you'll choose yours. She was quiet for a long time. When she looked up, her eyes were hard in a way he hadn't seen before. If he comes for me, I won't run. Not this time. Good. They walked back to the house together, the guns secured, the night closing in. Somewhere out there, Silas was planning his next move. But for the first time, Mara wasn't planning to run. She was planning to fight. Friday morning started with ice on the windows and a sense of wrongness Ethan couldn't name. He was feeding the horses when his phone rang. Frank Holloway's number. You got company coming. Silas? Him and 2 others, big guys, look like trouble. Heading up your road now. Ethan's blood went cold. Call the sheriff. Tell him to get here fast. He ran to the house. Mara was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough. She saw his face and went pale. He's coming. How many? 3. She wiped her hands on a towel, moved to the window. A minute later, the black truck appeared, followed by a second vehicle, a gray SUV with tinted windows. They parked in the yard, blocking the driveway. Silas got out first, flanked by 2 men who looked like they bench-pressed cars for fun. All 3 wore heavy coats, and Ethan would bet money there were weapons underneath. Stay inside, Ethan said, grabbing the Winchester. Ethan, stay inside. Lock the door behind me. If shooting starts, you get to the basement and you stay there until you hear my voice or the sheriff's. Understand? She nodded, her face white but determined. Ethan stepped onto the porch, the rifle held low but ready. Silas smiled when he saw him, that same empty smile from before. Mr. Cole, beautiful morning. You're violating a restraining order. Sheriff's on his way. I'm standing on a public access road. Last I checked, that's legal. Silas gestured to the 2 men. These are my associates. We're just here to talk. Nothing to talk about. I think there is. See, my wife's been filling your head with stories, lies mostly, and I understand she's convincing. She's had a lot of practice. But the truth is, Mara's sick. She needs help. Professional help. and I'm willing to provide it. All she has to do is come home. She's not going anywhere with you. Silas's smile faded. You don't have a say in that. She's my wife. That's a legal bond. What you're doing, harboring her, turning her against me, that's interference. Could even be considered kidnapping. That's not how the law works. Isn't it? You think that piece of paper the sheriff gave me means anything? Restraining orders are for show. They don't change facts. Mara belongs with me. She doesn't belong to anyone. That's where you're wrong. Silas took a step forward. His associates stayed by the vehicles, watching. Everything I've built, everything I've done has been for her. To protect her. To give her a good life. And this is how she repays me? Running away like a child? Spreading lies? Those aren't lies. We've got hospital records, police reports, witnesses. Silas laughed, a cold, cutting sound. You've got her word against mine. And let me tell you something about my word. It carries weight. I'm a respected member of my community. Volunteer firefighter, youth coach, the kind of man people trust. What are you? A failed rancher barely keeping his land? Who do you think they'll believe? Ethan's grip tightened on the rifle. You need to leave. Now. Or what? You'll shoot me? In front of witnesses? Silas spread his arms wide. Go ahead. Prove her right. Show everyone that violence is the only language you understand. The trap was obvious, and Ethan didn't take the bait. He kept the rifle pointed down, his finger off the trigger. Sheriff will be here in 5 minutes. You can explain to him why you're here. I'll tell him the truth, that I'm a concerned husband trying to bring his sick wife home. That you're the one keeping us apart. Silas's expression turned cruel. You think you're helping her? You're making it worse. Every day she stays here, every day she hides, is another day I have to spend tracking her down. And when I finally bring her home, and I will, she'll pay for every single one of those days. The threat hung in the cold air like smoke. Behind Ethan, the door opened. Mara stepped onto the porch, the .38 revolver held in both hands, pointed at the ground. Her face was set, jaw tight. Don't, Ethan said quietly. She ignored him. Her eyes were locked on Silas. Hello, sweetheart, Silas said, his voice turning honey-sweet. I've missed you. I'm not coming back. Of course you are. You always come back, remember? Not this time. Silas sighed, like he was dealing with a stubborn child. Mara, baby, I know you're scared. I know you think you want this. But you don't. You need me. You've always needed me. Without me, who are you? Nothing. Just another broken woman with nowhere to go. Mara's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. I'd rather be broken and free than whole and yours. Something flickered across Silas's face, rage barely contained. You ungrateful little... Sirens cut him off. Sheriff Hastings' cruiser came up the drive, lights flashing. The sheriff got out, hand on his weapon, taking in the scene. Mr. Vance, step away from the house. Silas's mask slipped back into place, the charming smile returning. Sheriff, I was just trying to talk to my wife. You're in violation of a restraining order. I'm on a public access road. That access road ends at Mr. Cole's property line, which is exactly where you're standing. That's a violation. You and your friends need to leave. Now. The two associates moved toward their vehicles, but Silas held his ground. This isn't over, he said, looking at Mara. You can hide behind these people all you want, but eventually you'll be alone. And when you are, I'll be there. Just like always. That's a threat, Hastings said sharply. You want me to arrest you right now? Silas climbed into his truck without another word. The vehicles reversed down the driveway, disappearing in clouds of dust and exhaust. Hastings holstered his weapon and climbed the porch steps. Everyone okay? Ethan nodded, but Mara was shaking, the revolver still in her hands. The sheriff gently took it from her, engaged the safety. You did good, he said quietly. Standing up to him. That took courage. It took stupidity, Mara whispered. Now he knows I'm willing to fight. That'll just make him angrier. Maybe. But it also showed him you're not the same woman he's been chasing. That might make him think twice. Or it might make him more determined to break me. Hastings didn't argue. They all knew she was probably right. After the sheriff left, Ethan and Mara sat in the kitchen, neither speaking. The confrontation had shaken something loose in both of them, the understanding that this was real, that words on paper wouldn't stop what was coming. "I should go," Mara finally said. "We've been through this." That was before he showed up with hired muscle, before he made it clear he's willing to escalate. She looked at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I can't watch him hurt you, Ethan. I can't. And I can't watch you run for the rest of your life. So I guess we're at an impasse. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. You made it my fight when you sat at my table and told me the truth, when you trusted me with something that heavy." He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. "I don't have much left to lose, Mara. This ranch is dying. My family's gone. I've been sleepwalking through life for 3 years. You woke me up, gave me something to care about. So no, I'm not letting you leave. Not because I own you or because I think you need saving, but because I choose to stand with you. And that choice is mine to make." Mara's tears finally fell, tracking down her face in silence. "What if we lose?" "Then we lose together. But at least we'll go down swinging." She squeezed his hand and they sat there in the quiet kitchen, two people who'd found each other at the end of everything, preparing for a war neither of them knew how to fight. Outside, the snow began to fall again, covering the world in white, erasing tracks and evidence, making everything clean and new. But beneath the surface, the rot remained, and it was coming for them both. The weekend passed in tense silence. Ethan kept watch in shifts, sleeping in 3-hour increments with the Winchester within arm's reach. Mara barely slept at all. He'd find her at 2 a.m, standing by the window, the revolver in her hand, watching the darkness like it might suddenly come alive. Sunday morning, Frank Holloway called again. "Your unwelcome visitor checked out of the motel." Ethan's stomach dropped. "When?" "Last night. But his truck's still in town. Saw it parked behind the old grain elevator around dawn. He's staying somewhere else." "That'd be my guess." "Wanted you to know." Frank paused. "Got my rifle cleaned and ready. He comes this way, he'll regret it. Frank, I can't ask you to—" "Didn't ask. I'm telling you how it is." The line went dead. Ethan found Mara in the kitchen, making breakfast neither of them would eat. Her movements were mechanical, precise. Like if she focused hard enough on cracking eggs and measuring coffee, she could ignore everything else. "He checked out of the motel," Ethan said. The spatula clattered against the pan. "Where is he?" Frank saw his truck behind the grain elevator. "He's staying somewhere off the books. Probably doesn't want a record of where he is." Mara turned off the stove, gripped the counter. "He's planning something." "Yeah. We should leave, both of us. Just get in the truck and drive until we hit an ocean." "Running didn't work before. Why would it work now?" "Because this time you'd be with me. We could disappear together, start over somewhere he'd never think to look." The offer hung between them, tempting in its simplicity. Just walk away from the failing ranch, the mounting debts, the ghost of his brother's expectations. Start fresh with someone who understood what it meant to carry weight. But Ethan had spent 3 years running from who he was supposed to be, and it had hollowed him out. Running from Silas would just be more of the same. "This is my land," he said quietly. "My family's land. I've already lost too much to it. I'm not losing anything else." "Even if it kills you?" "Even then." Mara's shoulders sagged. She looked small suddenly, despite her size, diminished by fear and exhaustion. "I don't want you to die for me. And I don't want you to spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder." He crossed to her, stopped just close enough that she could feel his presence without being crowded. "We end this here, one way or another." She turned to face him, and in her eyes he saw resignation mixed with something else. Determination, maybe, or just bone-deep weariness with being afraid. "Okay," she whispered. "We end it here." Monday brought Sarah Chen back to the ranch, this time with news that Silas's lawyer had filed a countersuit claiming alienation of affection and defamation. The legal terms meant less than the message. He was digging in, preparing for a long fight. "It's frivolous," Sarah said, spreading documents across the kitchen table. "Won't hold up in court, but it'll tie you up for months, maybe longer, death by 1,000 paper cuts." "Can we stop it?" Mara asked. "We can fight it, but that means depositions, court appearances, dragging every detail of your marriage into the open. He's counting on you not having the stomach for it." "What's the alternative?" "You could settle." Agree to mediation. Try to reach some kind of agreement that gets him out of your life. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. He doesn't get to negotiate. Not after everything he's done. I agree, Sarah said calmly. But I need you both to understand what you're signing up for. This isn't going to be clean or quick. Men like Silas Vance don't give up. They escalate. And when the legal system doesn't give them what they want, they find other ways. Like what? Mara's voice was barely audible. Like showing up with friends and vague threats. Like burning down buildings. Like making sure that even if they can't have you, nobody else can either. Sarah's expression was grim. I've represented 14 women in cases like yours. 3 of them are dead. 4 more are still in hiding. The rest got lucky. Their abusers found new targets or ended up in prison for something else. The statistics settled over them like a shroud. So what do we do? Ethan asked. You prepare for the worst and hope for the best. You document everything. You stay alert. And you accept that the system I work in, the courts, the laws, the restraining orders, they're tools, not solutions. They can help, but they can't save you. Only you can do that. After Sarah left, Mara stood at the window for a long time, watching the sky turn gray with approaching weather. 3 out of 14, she said softly. Those aren't good odds. We're not a statistic. Everyone thinks that until they become one. Ethan didn't have an answer for that. The truth was, she was right. They were rolling dice against loaded odds, and the house always won eventually. But sometimes you played anyway, because the alternative was giving up before the game even started. That night, the power went out. One moment the lights were on, the next they were plunged into darkness. Ethan grabbed a flashlight, checked the breaker box. Everything looked fine. He called the power company and got a recorded message. No outages reported in the area. Someone cut the line, he said, returning to the living room where Mara waited with the revolver in her lap. How far out? Can't tell without checking. Could be at the road, could be at the pole by the barn. It's a message. Or a distraction. Ethan grabbed the Winchester, checked the chamber. Stay here. Keep the doors locked. I'll check the perimeter. Don't go out there alone. I'll be fine. Just stay put. He stepped out into the cold, every sense on high alert. The ranch was dark except for the moon reflecting off snow. No wind. No sound except his own breathing and the crunch of his boots. The barn loomed ahead, its dark shape somehow menacing in the stillness. Ethan swept the flashlight across the structure, looking for movement, for anything out of place. Nothing. He was halfway to the barn when he smelled it. Gasoline. The realization hit a second before the barn exploded into flames. The blast knocked him backward, heat washing over him in a wave that stole his breath. He scrambled to his feet, ears ringing, and watched as fire consumed the structure with terrifying speed. Someone had doused the place, turned it into a tinderbox. Behind him, the house. Mara. Ethan ran, slipping on ice, his lungs burning from the cold and the smoke. He burst through the front door to find Mara standing in the living room, the revolver raised. They're here, she said. How many? I don't know. I heard voices by the kitchen window. At least 2, maybe more. Ethan killed the flashlight, let his eyes adjust to the darkness. Outside, the barn fire cast flickering orange light across the snow, creating dancing shadows that made it impossible to track movement. Glass shattered in the kitchen. Mara flinched, but held her ground. Mara! Silas's voice calling from outside. This is your last chance. Come out now, and nobody gets hurt. Stay inside, and things get ugly. Don't answer him, Ethan whispered. He'll burn the house. Let him try. These walls are stone. They won't burn easy. Another crash, this time from upstairs. They were throwing rocks, trying to flush them out. Ethan moved to the phone, dialed 911. Dead. They'd cut the landline along with the power. Cell phone, Mara said, pulling hers from her pocket. No signal. She held it up, moved around the room. Nothing. Jammer, Ethan said. They're blocking everything. We're trapped. No, we're fortified. There's a difference. He moved to the gun cabinet, pulled out boxes of ammunition. We've got food, water, and enough firepower to hold them off until someone notices the fire. Frank will see it. He'll call the sheriff. And if he doesn't, then we shoot our way out. The confidence in his voice was manufactured, but Mara seemed to draw strength from it. She took a position by the window, keeping low, watching the yard. I see 3 of them, she said. Silas and the 2 from before. They're arguing about something. Ethan joined her, peering through the gap in the curtains. The 3 men stood near the burning barn, silhouetted against the flames. One of them was gesturing wildly, clearly unhappy about something. Silas was calm, unmoved. After a moment, Silas pointed toward the house and said something that made the other men nod. They split up, one heading toward the back, one toward the side, Silas staying front and center. They're surrounding us, Mara said. Good. Means they can't support each other. We take them one at a time. Ethan, I've never shot at a person. You might not have to. Just the threat might be enough. He handed her extra ammunition. But if it comes down to it, you aim center mass and you don't hesitate. Hesitation gets you killed. She loaded the revolver with shaking hands, then steadied herself. Okay, I can do this. I know you can. The back door rattled, someone testing the lock. Ethan positioned himself with a sightline, the Winchester raised. The rattling stopped, replaced by the sound of something heavy hitting the door. Once. Twice. On the 3rd impact, wood splintered but held. Reinforced it last year, Ethan muttered. Take more than that. A gunshot cracked the night, and the window beside Mara exploded. She dove away as glass rained down, scrambling behind the couch. You okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Another shot, this one taking out the living room window. Then silence. Ethan risked a look outside. Silas was standing in the open, a pistol in his hand, utterly calm. Last chance, Mara. Walk out that door, or I start putting rounds through the walls. You want your friend's death on your conscience? Mara's breath came in short gasps, panic rising. Ethan moved to her side, gripped her shoulder. Don't listen to him. He's trying to get in your head. It's working. That's because he's had years to learn your buttons. But you're not that person anymore. You're the woman who stood on a porch with a gun and told him no. Remember? She nodded, breathing slowing. I remember. Then show him again. Mara stood, moved to the broken window, and fired twice into the air. The shots echoed across the valley, a declaration more than an attack. Silas laughed. There she is, that's my girl, so you do have some fight in you. I'm not your girl, Mara screamed. I was never your anything. You're a coward and a monster, and I'd rather die than spend another second under your control. The laughter died. When Silas spoke again, his voice was cold. You just made your choice. Remember that when this is over. He gestured to his men, and they moved with purpose. The one at the back door renewed his assault, the impacts coming faster, harder. The one on the side disappeared from view, reappearing a moment later on the roof of the porch. He's going for the upstairs windows, Ethan said. Stay here. Watch Silas. Ethan, trust me. He took the stairs 2 at a time, reached the 2nd floor just as glass shattered in the spare bedroom. A man was climbing through, all bulk and muscle, a crowbar in his hand. Ethan didn't give him time to get his bearings. He swung the rifle like a club, catching the man across the jaw. The intruder dropped, half in and half out of the window, groaning. Downstairs, Mara screamed. Ethan ran back, his heart in his throat. He reached the living room to find Mara backing away from the kitchen doorway. The second man had gotten through, the door hanging off its hinges. He was bigger than his partner, with dead eyes and a shotgun that looked like a toy in his massive hands. Drop it, the man said, his voice flat. Ethan raised the Winchester. You first. This doesn't have to go bad. Boss just wants his wife back. You hand her over, we leave. Simple. Nothing about this is simple. Your funeral. The man's finger tightened on the trigger. Mara fired first. The .38 barked once, twice, 3 times. The first shot went wide, the second caught the man in the shoulder, the third in the chest. He staggered backward, the shotgun discharging into the ceiling, then collapsed. The silence that followed was deafening. Mara stood frozen, the revolver still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. Her eyes were wide, unseeing, locked on the body. Mara. Ethan moved to her slowly. Mara, look at me. She didn't respond. Mara, we don't have time. I need you here. With me. Right now. Finally, her eyes focused. She looked at him, then at the gun in her hand, then at the man she'd shot. I killed him. You defended yourself. I killed someone. and you're alive because of it. That matters. Outside, Silas was screaming, not words, just rage, raw and animal, the sound of a man losing control. "He's coming," Mara whispered. The front door exploded inward. Silas stood in the opening, his pistol raised, his face a mask of fury. Behind him, the barn was fully engulfed, flames reaching toward the sky. "You killed Danny," Silas said, his voice shaking. "You actually killed him." "He was going to kill us," Mara said. "So what? You think that gives you the right? You think you get to make that choice?" Silas advanced into the room, the gun unwavering. "Everything I've done has been for you. Every decision, every sacrifice. And this is how you repay me? By murdering my friends? They weren't your friends. They were thugs you hired. They were loyal, more loyal than you ever were." Silas was fully inside now, close enough that Ethan could see the sweat on his face despite the cold. "I gave you everything, a home, security, purpose. What did he give you?" He gestured at Ethan with the gun. "A dying ranch and false hope?" "He gave me a choice," Mara said quietly. "Something you never did." "Choice." Silas spat the word. "You don't need choices, you need direction, structure. You need me to tell you who you are because you've never been strong enough to figure it out yourself." "You're wrong." "Am I? Then prove it. Shoot me, right now. Pull that trigger and show me how strong you've become." Mara raised the revolver, her hand steadier than Ethan would have believed possible. "Don't make me." "You won't do it. You don't have it in you. You're weak. You've always been weak. That's why you need me." "I don't need you. I never did. I just needed to believe I was worth something, and you made sure I never could." Silas's face twisted. "You're nothing without me. You hear me? Nothing." He swung the pistol toward Ethan. Mara fired. The shot caught Silas in the side, spinning him around. His gun went off, the round punching through the wall behind Ethan's head. He stumbled, clutching his ribs, blood seeping between his fingers. But he didn't fall. Instead, he turned back to Mara, his eyes bright with something between pain and exhilaration. "There she is. There's the woman I married. I knew you had it in you." "Stay down," Mara said, her voice breaking. "Make me." He raised his gun again, slower this time, his movements labored. Mara fired twice more. Both shots hit center mass. Silas dropped to his knees, the pistol slipping from his fingers. He looked up at her, blood on his lips, and smiled. "See? I told you. You do need me. Even if it's just to give you something to kill." Then he fell forward and didn't move again. Mara lowered the revolver, her whole body shaking. The gun slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud. She stared at Silas's body, at the blood pooling beneath him, at the final, terrible proof that she'd broken free. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Frank must have seen the fire, made the call. Help was coming. But as Ethan moved to Mara's side, wrapped his arms around her as she finally broke down, he knew the help was too late to stop what had already happened. They'd survived. But survival came with a cost written in blood and trauma, in the weight of having taken lives to preserve their own. The barn collapsed with a roar, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. The heat was intense even from inside the house, turning the broken windows into frames for an apocalyptic painting. Mara clung to Ethan, her sobs silent and shaking. He held her, his own emotions a tangled mess he couldn't begin to sort. Relief, horror, exhaustion. "It's over," he said, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. She pulled back, looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Is it? He's dead, but everything he did, everything he made me believe about myself, that doesn't just disappear." "No. But you get to choose what to do with it now. That's what freedom means." The first sheriff's cruiser pulled into the yard, followed by two more. EMTs, firefighters, the whole cavalry arriving after the battle had been fought. Sheriff Hastings was the first through the door, his weapon drawn, taking in the scene with a practiced eye. The body in the kitchen. The body in the living room. Silas on the floor, the pool of blood still spreading. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "Anyone else hurt?" "We're okay," Ethan said. "There's one more upstairs. I hit him, but he might still be alive." Two deputies moved to check. Hastings holstered his weapon, pulled out his radio. "I need crime scene techs out at the Cole Ranch. Multiple..." Multiple casualties, possible home invasion, and get me the state police. This is bigger than we can handle. The next hours blurred together. Statements, photographs, evidence collection. They separated Ethan and Mara, questioned them individually, comparing stories. Standard procedure, Hastings explained, though his tone was apologetic. The man upstairs was alive but unconscious. The one Mara shot was declared dead at the scene. And Silas was gone. His reign of terror ended by the woman he'd tried to destroy. Dawn was breaking when they finally let Ethan and Mara sit together again, wrapped in blankets despite the EMT's insistence they go to the hospital for observation. The barn was a smoking ruin. The house was wrecked. But they were alive. Sarah Chen arrived just after 7, having driven through the night when she heard the news. She sat with them, a buffer between the questions and the questioners, making sure they didn't say anything that could be used against them. "It's clear-cut self-defense," she said quietly. "Multiple witnesses saw them threaten you, the destroyed property, the weapons, the forced entry. You're going to be fine. Legally, anyway." "And otherwise?" Mara asked. Sarah's expression softened. "That's going to take time, therapy probably, and patience with yourself. What you did tonight, it was necessary. But necessary doesn't mean easy to live with." "I keep seeing his face," Mara whispered. "The way he looked at me when he fell, like he'd won somehow. Like even dying he'd gotten what he wanted." "He didn't win," Ethan said firmly. "You're alive, you're free. That's the only victory that matters." But even as he said it, he wondered. Freedom had a price, and they'd both paid more than they'd anticipated. By noon, the state police had wrapped up the initial investigation. The story would dominate local news for weeks. Woman shoots abusive husband in ranch standoff. But the legal consensus was already forming. Justifiable homicide, self-defense, case closed. Silas's family hired a lawyer, threatened to sue everyone involved, then quietly dropped it when the full extent of his history came to light. Hospital records, police reports from 3 states, testimony from women he dated before Mara, each with similar stories. The man had been a monster, carefully hidden behind a mask of respectability, and now that mask was gone, revealing the rot underneath for everyone to see. Frank Holloway showed up that afternoon with a crew of neighbors. They started clearing debris from the barn, salvaging what could be saved, making plans to rebuild. Nobody asked Ethan if he wanted help. They just showed up and worked, the way communities do when one of their own is hurting. Lonnie brought food, casseroles and sandwiches, enough to feed an army. She hugged Mara without saying a word, just held her for a long moment, offering the comfort of human contact without the burden of conversation. As the sun set on that long, terrible day, Ethan and Mara stood on the porch and watched the neighbors work. The barn's footprint was a blackened scar on the snow, but around it people moved with purpose, creating order from chaos. "They're rebuilding," Mara said softly. "That's what people do. We break, we burn, and then we build again. It's the only way forward." She leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. They stood like that for a long time, 2 survivors watching the world prove that even in the darkest moments, there was still light to be found. "What happens now?" Mara asked. "Now we heal, we rebuild. We figure out who we are on the other side of this. Together? If you want that." She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw the same question he'd been carrying. What were they to each other? Allies forged in crisis? Friends bound by trauma? Or something more, something that had been growing in the spaces between survival and hope? "I want that," she said. "I want to stay, to help rebuild, to see what this place, what we, could become." Ethan smiled, the first genuine smile in what felt like years. "Then let's get to work." The road ahead would be long. The nightmares wouldn't fade overnight. The weight of what they'd done, what they'd been forced to do, would follow them for years. But they'd face it together, on land that had seen generations of struggle and survival. The ranch had outlasted drought and depression, loss and grief. It would outlast this too, and so would they. The first week after the fire passed in a haze of official visits and restless nights. Detectives came and went, documenting every detail, taking measurements and photographs, until Ethan felt like his home had become a crime scene museum, which he supposed it had. The bullet holes in the walls were marked with numbered placards. The bloodstains on the living room floor had been photographed from 17 different angles before they were finally allowed to clean them up. Mara scrubbed those stains herself, on her hands and knees, refusing help. Ethan watched from the doorway, understanding that this was something she needed to do alone. A ritual, maybe. Or penance for a sin that wasn't hers to carry. "You don't have to do that," he'd said quietly. "Yes, I do." Her voice was flat, mechanical. "I need to see it gone. Need to know it can be erased." But some stains went deeper than wood and fabric. Ethan saw it in the way she startled at sudden sounds, the way her hand drifted to her hip where the revolver had been before the police took it as evidence, the way she positioned herself in every room to see the doors. Sarah Chen called daily, checking in, making sure they were holding up under the scrutiny. The district attorney had ruled it justifiable homicide within 72 hours, but the court of public opinion was slower to verdict. The local news ran the story with sensational headlines. Abused woman kills husband in violent standoff. And the internet did what it always did, turning tragedy into entertainment. Some people called Mara a hero, others called her a murderer. Most didn't call her anything at all, just stared when she went into town for supplies, their eyes following her like she was a ghost haunting their everyday lives. "They think I'm dangerous," she said one evening, unpacking groceries in silence. "They think you're interesting. There's a difference." "Is there?" "I see the way they look at me. Like I might snap at any moment, like violence is contagious." Ethan took the bag from her hand, set it on the counter. "You're not violent. You're a survivor who did what she had to do. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth your energy." "And what about you? How do you see me?" The question caught him off guard. He looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who'd been hollowed out by trauma and was slowly, painfully, learning how to fill the empty spaces with something besides fear. "I see someone who's stronger than she knows, someone who's been through hell and came out the other side still willing to try." "Try what?" "Living, hoping, believing there's more ahead than just survival." Her eyes filled with tears she wouldn't let fall. "What if that's all there is? What if I'm broken in ways that can't be fixed?" "Then you're broken. So am I. So is everyone who's lived long enough to get hurt. But broken doesn't mean worthless. Sometimes the broken pieces fit together in ways the whole parts never could." She almost smiled at that. Almost. The insurance adjuster came on Thursday, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who looked like he'd never seen anything more violent than a fender bender. He surveyed the damage with increasing dismay, taking notes on a tablet, occasionally muttering to himself. "The barn's a total loss," he announced. "The house has significant structural damage. The door frames, the windows, bullet holes in load-bearing walls. This is going to take months to process." "How much are we talking?" Ethan asked. The adjuster consulted his tablet. "Preliminary estimate? $150,000 for the barn, another $80,000 for the house. But there are complications." "What kind of complications?" "Your policy has a war clause. Excludes damage from riots, civil unrest, or acts of domestic terrorism. Your lawyer could argue this was a home invasion, but if the insurance company decides it was domestic violence that escalated to property destruction, they might deny the claim." Ethan felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. "You're saying we might not be covered?" "I'm saying it's going to be contested. Could go either way." The adjuster had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I'll file the claim, push it up the chain, but you should prepare for a fight." After he left, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and did math that didn't work no matter how many times he ran the numbers. Even before the fire, the ranch was underwater. Now, with repairs needed and insurance in limbo, there was no path forward that didn't end in foreclosure. Mara found him there an hour later, surrounded by bills and bank statements, his head in his hands. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad. Even if insurance pays out, which is a big if, I'm still 6 months behind on the mortgage. The bank's been patient, but patience has limits." "How much do you need?" He laughed, the sound bitter. "More than I've got. More than I can make. I've been bleeding money for 3 years trying to keep this place alive. The fire just accelerated the inevitable." Mara sat down across from him, picked up one of the statements. "What if we sold some land? Just enough to cover the debt?" "Already thought of that. The land's worth something, but not much in this market. And once you start selling off pieces, the rest becomes less viable. It's all or nothing. Then we sell all of it." "No." The word came out harder than he intended. This ranch has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather built the barn we just lost with his own hands. My father died trying to keep this place running. My brother, his voice caught. Jackson's buried on that hill behind the house. I can't just walk away from that. Even if staying destroys you? Even then. Mara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. Your grandfather built that barn. But barns can be rebuilt. Your father worked this land, but land doesn't care who owns it. And Jackson's gone, Ethan. He's not in that grave. He's in your memories, your stories, the way you try to honor what he would have wanted. But you can't live someone else's dream. Eventually, you have to figure out what you want. I want to keep my family's legacy alive. No, you want to not disappoint ghosts. There's a difference. She reached across the table, took his hand. I'm not saying sell. I'm saying be honest about why you're holding on. Because if it's guilt or obligation, that's quicksand. It'll drag you down no matter how hard you fight. The words hit like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. He'd spent 3 years trying to be Jackson, trying to fill boots that had never fit, and all he'd accomplished was driving himself into the ground and the ranch toward ruin. I don't know what else to do, he admitted. This is all I have. It's not. You have neighbors who showed up to help. You have a lawyer fighting for us. You have me. She squeezed his hand. We'll figure it out together. But first you need to let go of the idea that you owe anything to the past. The only people we owe are ourselves and each other. That night, Ethan walked out to the hill where Jackson was buried. The headstone was simple granite, engraved with just a name and dates. No epitaph. Jackson had never been one for words. Ethan sat in the snow, his back against the cold stone, and talked to his brother for the first time in 3 years. I'm losing it, Jack. The ranch, the legacy, all of it. I tried. I really did. But I'm not you. I was never going to be you, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. The wind was his only answer, carrying the scent of smoke from the burned barn. There's this woman, Mara. You'd like her. She's tough, tougher than she looks. Been through worse than I can imagine, and she's still standing, still trying. I think... He stopped, the words catching. I think I love her, which is crazy, right? We barely know each other. But somehow she sees me. Not the guy trying to be his brother, not the failed rancher, just me. And that's terrifying because if she really knew me, she'd know I'm barely holding it together. The confession hung in the air, lighter somehow for being spoken. I don't know what to do, Jack. Do I keep fighting for this place? Or do I let it go and try to build something new? What would you do? The silence stretched, and then, slowly, an answer formed, not from any supernatural source, but from memory. Jackson's voice in his head, loud and clear from a conversation years ago. Stop trying to live my life, little brother. Live your own. Ethan closed his eyes, let the tears come. When he finally stood, the weight he'd been carrying felt lighter. Not gone. That would take time, but manageable. He walked back to the house where light glowed in the kitchen window and Mara was making something that smelled like hope. The weekend brought Frank Holloway and his crew back to start clearing the barn foundation. They worked with quiet efficiency, hauling away charred timber, sorting through debris for anything salvageable. Frank found the old horseshoes Ethan's grandfather had hung over the door for luck, somehow unscathed by the fire. Looks like luck held after all, Frank said, handing them over. Ethan turned them over in his hands, the metal cool and solid. Barely. Barely's enough. That's the thing about luck. You only need a little to make a difference. They worked side by side and Ethan found himself talking about the insurance problems, the mortgage arrears, the impossible math. Frank listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding. You thought about taking on investors? Frank asked eventually. Who'd invest in a dying ranch? People who see potential. This valley's changing. Used to be just cattle and crops, but now you got folks from the cities looking for places to put down roots. Ranch properties are getting bought up for events, retreats, that kind of thing. Frank gestured at the land. You've got 160 acres, good water, decent access to the highway. Could be worth something to the right buyer. Not to buy you out, to buy in, partner up. Ethan had never considered it, The ranch had always been family only, a closed system. But then tradition hadn't saved them. Maybe flexibility would. "I'll think about it," he said. "Do that. And while you're thinking, think about this. Sometimes the best way to honor the past is to build something better for the future." That night, Ethan sketched ideas on scrap paper. Not just rebuilding the barn, but reimagining the whole operation. The ranch was too small for commercial cattle, too isolated for tourism in the traditional sense. But maybe there was a middle ground. Events, weddings, corporate retreats. The house could be renovated, the land developed in careful ways that preserved its character while making it sustainable. Mara found him at midnight, surrounded by sketches and half-formed plans. "What's all this?" she asked. "The future. Maybe." He showed her the drawings. Frank suggested investors, people who'd pay to use the land without owning it. We could rebuild the barn as an event space, fix up the house to host guests, keep the ranch alive by changing what it means to be a ranch. She studied the sketches, her expression thoughtful. "You'd be okay with that? Strangers on your family's land?" "My family's land was dying. Maybe it needs new blood, new purpose." He looked at her. "What do you think?" "I think it's brilliant, but I also think you're terrified it won't work." "Of course I am. What if we pour everything into this and it fails anyway?" "Then it fails. But at least you'll have tried something instead of just holding on until there's nothing left to hold." She sat down beside him, picked up one of the sketches. "You're good at this. The design work. Did you ever think about doing it professionally?" "I was going to. Before Jackson died, had a place at a firm in Denver lined up. Then the accident happened and you put your life on hold to live his." "Yeah. What if you didn't have to choose? What if the ranch could be part of your design work instead of separate from it? You redesign this place, make it work, and suddenly you've got a portfolio piece. Proof you can take something broken and make it beautiful." The idea sparked something in Ethan's chest. Hope, maybe. Or just the possibility of it. "We'd need capital, a lot of it. Even with investors, there are costs. So we find them. We put together a proposal, show people what this could be. Sarah might know someone, the neighbors might have connections." Mara's eyes were bright now, animated in a way he hadn't seen since before the fire. "This could work, Ethan. It could actually work." They stayed up until dawn, refining ideas, making lists, building a vision of what the ranch could become. Somewhere in those hours, the impossible started to feel possible. Monday morning, they drove to Cheyenne to meet with a small business development consultant Sarah had recommended. The woman, Helen Torres, listened to their pitch with the practiced attention of someone who'd heard 1,000 ideas and seen most of them fail. When they finished, she leaned back in her chair. "It's ambitious. Event spaces are saturated in some markets, but rural Wyoming, that's underserved. People want authentic experiences, rustic charm with modern amenities. If you can deliver that, there's definitely a market." "What would we need?" Ethan asked. Helen pulled out a laptop, started running numbers. "Conservatively, $200,000 to get started. That covers basic renovation, marketing, licensing, insurance. You'd want to start small, maybe just wedding events the first year, then expand as cash flow improves. 200,000 might as well have been 2 million. Ethan's face must have shown it because Helen smiled. "I know it sounds like a lot, but there are grants for rural development, low-interest loans for agricultural diversification. Wyoming wants to keep ranches viable. They'll help if you meet their criteria." She slid a folder across the desk. "These are the programs I'd recommend applying to. It's paperwork heavy and competitive, but you've got a compelling story. Woman overcoming domestic violence, rancher preserving family legacy. That plays well with grant committees." Mara shifted uncomfortably. "I don't want to use what happened as a selling point. It's not exploitation if it's true. You're rebuilding your lives. The ranch is part of that. Committees want to fund projects that make a difference, that mean something beyond just profit. Your story does that." Helen's expression softened. "I understand the hesitation, but sometimes the best way to reclaim your narrative is to tell it yourself, on your terms." They left with a briefcase full of applications and a timeline that felt both exciting and overwhelming. 6 months to secure funding, a year to renovate, another year to establish the business. Long-term planning for people who'd been living day-to-day since November. We can do this, Warashi, Mara said on the drive home. You sound more confident than I feel. That's because I've spent 5 years believing I couldn't do anything. Every day I wake up and I'm still alive, still here, still trying. That's me proving myself wrong. This is just more of the same, one day at a time, one step forward. And if we fail, then we fail knowing we tried. That's more than I had a month ago. Ethan reached over, took her hand. When this is over, when we're stable and the ranch is running, what do you want? For yourself, I mean. Not for us or the business, just you. She was quiet for a long time. I want to wake up without being afraid. I want to make decisions without second-guessing myself into paralysis. I want to feel like I'm building something instead of just surviving. She glanced at him. And I want you, if you'll have me. The confession was simple, honest, and it hit Ethan with the force of something he hadn't realized he'd been waiting to hear. Yeah, he said, his voice rough. Yeah, I'll have you. They spent the next month buried in paperwork, grant applications, low on proposals, business plans with financial projections that required educated guesses and optimistic assumptions. Mara threw herself into the work with an intensity that bordered on obsession, staying up late to perfect their pitch, researching comparable businesses, building spreadsheets that tracked every conceivable expense. Ethan worried she was using work to avoid processing what had happened. But when he suggested she talk to someone, a therapist, a counselor, anyone, she'd shut down. I don't need to talk about it. I need to move forward. Those aren't mutually exclusive. For me, they are. Every time I think about that night, I see his face. I see him falling. I hear the sound of... She stopped, swallowed hard. I can't live there. I have to live here, in the now, working towards something that isn't about him. Ethan understood the impulse, even if he didn't agree with it. Some wounds needed air to heal. Others needed to be covered up and left alone. He couldn't tell her which kind hers were. The nightmares started in the second week. He'd wake to find her sitting by the window, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring out at the darkness. Can't sleep? He asked one night, finding her there at 3 a.m. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back there, in the living room. He's standing over me, and I'm pulling the trigger, and he's falling, and then it starts over, like a loop I can't escape. Ethan sat beside her, didn't try to fix it or make it better. Sometimes presence was all you could offer. Sarah gave me a number, Mara said quietly, a therapist who specializes in trauma. I called her today. Yeah? I have an appointment next week. I don't know if it'll help, but... She laughed, the sound hollow. I can't keep living like this, jumping at shadows, seeing threats where there aren't any. It's exhausting. That's brave. Making the call. It's not brave. It's desperate. There's a difference. I don't think there is. Desperation that drives you to help yourself, that's just courage wearing different clothes. She leaned against him, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars through the window until the sky began to lighten with dawn. The grant responses started arriving in March. Most were rejections, polite, form letter regrets that thanked them for their interest, but noted the competitive nature of the funding. Each one stung, but they kept pushing forward. Then, in mid-April, an acceptance. A rural development grant for $50,000, contingent on matching funds and a detailed implementation plan. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was a start. Ethan whooped when he read the letter, grabbing Mara and spinning her around the kitchen. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months, and the sound was better than any check. We did it, she said, breathless. We got a down payment, still need the rest. We'll find it. We're on the board now. That means something. 2 weeks later, a second acceptance. A small business loan from a regional bank, $75,000 at reasonable terms. Then Frank Holloway stopped by with news that a group of local ranchers wanted to invest. $20,000 pooled together, no equity required, just paid back over 5 years. By May, they had it. Not everything they needed, but enough to start, enough to rebuild. The barn raising happened on a Saturday in late May, the kind of perfect spring day that made winter feel like a distant memory. 30 people showed up, neighbors, friends, people Ethan barely knew who'd heard about the project and wanted to help. They worked in teams, framing walls, raising beams, turning the blackened scar into something new. Mara organized food, keeping everyone fed and hydrated, moving through the crowd with an ease that surprised Ethan. She was smiling, joking with Frank's wife, showing kids how to safely hand off tools. The woman who'd arrived 6 months ago, hunched and silent and terrified, was gone. In her place was someone who'd learned to take up space without apology. By sunset, the barn skeleton stood complete, raw lumber and potential, waiting to be finished. Everyone gathered for photos, tired and satisfied, and Ethan felt something shift inside him. This wasn't his grandfather's ranch anymore. It wasn't even his father's or Jackson's. It was his, and Mara's, and everyone who'd helped build it. That night, after everyone had gone home, Ethan and Mara walked out to look at their work. The barn stood against the darkening sky, incomplete but unmistakably real. "Thank you," Ethan said. "For what?" "For pushing me. For believing this could work when I was ready to give up. For staying." Mara turned to him, her face soft in the fading light. "You gave me a place to stand when I had nowhere else to go. You stood between me and someone who wanted to destroy me. You rebuilt me as much as I rebuilt you, so no thanks necessary. We saved each other." He kissed her then, slow and gentle, a promise more than a question. She kissed him back, and for the first time since the fire, the future felt like something to move toward instead of something to survive. They stood there as stars emerged overhead, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful from the broken pieces. The ranch would open in a year. There would be setbacks and challenges, moments of doubt and fear, but they'd face them together, on land that had learned to bloom again after burning. And that, Ethan thought, was enough. The summer passed in a blur of construction and decisions that had to be made faster than Ethan was comfortable with. The barn's frame was solid, but finishing it required choices about materials, layouts, electrical systems that would support events without looking industrial. Mara threw herself into the design work with unexpected talent, sketching ideas for how the space could transform. Rustic for weddings, professional for corporate retreats, warm and inviting for family gatherings. They argued sometimes, usually when exhaustion made small disagreements feel larger than they were. Ethan wanted to preserve the barn's original character. Mara wanted functionality first, authenticity second. They'd stand in the half-finished structure, voices rising as they debated lighting fixtures or floor finishes, until one of them would laugh at the absurdity of fighting over details when 6 months ago they'd been fighting for their lives. "We're arguing about chandeliers," Mara said one afternoon, shaking her head. "Actual chandeliers. Reclaimed wood versus wrought iron is important. It's really not." "Then why are we yelling?" She smiled, tired but genuine. "Because we care. About this place. About getting it right. That's not a bad thing." Ethan set down the catalog he'd been holding, walked over to where she stood surrounded by fabric samples and paint chips. "You're right. I'm sorry. I've been so focused on what this barn used to be that I'm not thinking about what it needs to become. And I've been so focused on making it work that I forgot why we're doing this. It's not just business. It's your family's legacy. That matters." She picked up one of his sketches, studied it with fresh eyes. "What if we compromise? We use the reclaimed wood for the main beams, keep that authentic feel, but go with modern fixtures for the practical stuff. Best of both worlds. That could work?" "Of course it could work. We're smart people who occasionally get stubborn." She kissed him quickly. "Now, help me figure out flooring before I lose my mind." Her therapy sessions continued weekly, an hour every Thursday afternoon when she'd drive into Cheyenne and come back quieter, sometimes with red eyes that suggested hard conversations. Ethan never pushed for details, just made dinner and gave her space to process. One evening in July, she told him what they'd been working on. She says, "I'm carrying guilt I don't own. That what happened to Silas was self-defense, but I've twisted it into something I should have prevented. Like if I'd just been smarter, stronger, different somehow, none of it would have happened." Mara's voice was steady, but her hands weren't, trembling slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. "And the thing is, part of me still believes that. Part of me thinks if I'd just loved him better, been quieter, more careful, he wouldn't have turned into what he was." "You know that's not true." "Intellectually, yes. But knowing something and believing it are different. My therapist says it'll take time. That undoing years of conditioning doesn't happen overnight." She looked at him. "Some days I wake up and I feel free. Really free, like I can breathe for the first time. Other days I wake up and expect him to be standing at the foot of the bed telling me all the ways I disappointed him, even though he's dead, even though I watched him die. Ethan moved his chair closer, took her hand. What do you need? From me, I mean. How can I help? You already do. By not treating me like I'm fragile, by arguing with me about chandeliers and trusting me to make decisions and not hovering like I might break. She squeezed his fingers. You see me as whole even when I feel shattered. That's everything. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when two people have stopped performing for each other and started just being. Outside, the sun was setting over the half-finished barn, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. There's something else, Mara said after a while. Something I haven't told you. Ethan waited, giving her space. I've been having dreams. Not nightmares. Different. Dreams where I'm standing in a kitchen that's not quite this one, cooking for people I can't quite see. And I'm happy. Not just content or okay, but genuinely happy. Laughing, living. She paused. And there are children. 2 of them. A boy and a girl. They're calling me Mom. You want kids? I didn't think I did. For years I told myself I could never bring children into a world where someone like Silas existed. Could never risk creating someone he could hurt or control. But he's gone now. And the world feels different, bigger, full of possibility instead of just threat. She looked at him, vulnerable in a way that still surprised him. Is that something you'd want? Eventually? Ethan thought about it. He'd never given much consideration to fatherhood. Had always assumed the ranch would be his legacy, that children were something other people had. But sitting here with Mara, imagining a future that included small voices and laughter echoing through the house, something shifted. Yeah, he said slowly. Yeah, I think I would. The relief on her face was palpable. Not now, not for a while, but someday. Someday sounds perfect. The house renovations were slower than the barn. They'd focused their limited resources on the event space first, knowing that's where revenue would come from. But the house couldn't be ignored forever. It was still scarred from the attack, windows patched with plywood, bullet holes filled but not finished, doors that didn't quite hang right. In August, they tackled it together. Ethan handled the structural work while Mara painted, sanded, refinished surfaces that had accumulated decades of neglect. They found things as they worked, old photographs in the attic, his mother's recipe cards in a kitchen drawer, a box of Jackson's belongings Ethan had boxed up and never opened. Mara found him sitting on his old bedroom floor, surrounded by his brother's things. Baseball trophies, high school yearbooks, a worn denim jacket that still smelled faintly of leather and hay. You okay? She asked, sitting beside him. I don't know. I spent so long trying to be him that I forgot to remember him. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Ethan picked up a photo. Jackson on horseback, grinning at the camera, alive and vital and gone. He would have hated what I did to this place. The struggle, the slow death. He would have pivoted years ago, changed course, done something bold. Maybe. Or maybe he would have done exactly what you did, held on too long because letting go felt like betraying something bigger than himself. Mara took the photo, studied it. You talk about him like he was perfect, but nobody is. He was just a person who died before he could make his own mistakes. That feels disloyal somehow. It's not. It's honest. You can love someone and still see them clearly. That's healthier than whatever you've been doing, making him into a saint you could never measure up to. Ethan thought about that, about the Jackson he'd invented in the years since the accident, flawless, capable, everything Ethan wasn't, and the real Jackson who'd been good at ranching but terrible with money, who charmed everyone but struggled to commit to anything long-term, who died driving drunk on a back road because he was too proud to call for a ride. He was complicated, Ethan said finally. Like everyone. Like you, like me, like everyone worth knowing. Mara handed the photo back. You want my advice? Keep 1 or 2 things that matter. Let the rest go. You're not preserving his memory by hoarding his stuff. You're preserving it by living a life he'd respect. They spent the afternoon sorting through the box. Most of it went to charity, clothes and books and trinkets that meant nothing without context. Ethan kept the photo, the denim jacket, and a pocket knife their grandfather had given Jackson on his 16th birthday. Everything else, he let go. It felt like exhaling after holding his breath for 3 years. That evening, they burned the rest in a barrel outside. Not out of disrespect, but as a ceremony, releasing the weight of expectations that had been crushing Ethan since the day Jackson died. "How do you feel?" Mara asked, watching the flames consume old papers and memories. "Lighter. Guilty for feeling lighter, but mostly just relieved. That's growth. Being able to hold multiple truths at once. When did you get so wise?" Therapy and survival. Both excellent teachers. September brought their first event booking. A wedding for a couple from Cheyenne who'd seen their website, still rough, still being built, but functional, and loved the story. Young love and new beginnings on a ranch that had survived its own trauma. The symmetry appealed to them. Ethan panicked. "We're not ready. The barn's not finished. We don't have proper bathrooms. The parking area is a mud pit." "We have 6 weeks," Mara said calmly. "We make a list, we prioritize, we get it done. And if we can't, then we refund their deposit and reschedule. But we're going to get it done." She was right, though it took every hour of those 6 weeks and help from half the county. Frank and his crew finished the interior while Ethan and Mara handled the landscaping. Lonnie coordinated catering. Sarah helped with the permits and licensing. Even Sheriff Hastings stopped by, making sure everything was up to code, offering suggestions based on decades of seeing what could go wrong. The week before the wedding, Mara had a breakdown. Ethan found her in the barn at 2 in the morning, sitting on the floor, hyperventilating. "I can't do this," she gasped. "There's too much. Too many people watching. What if I mess up? What if something goes wrong and everyone sees what a fraud I am?" Ethan sat beside her, didn't try to fix it or minimize it. "You're scared, terrified. That makes sense. This is the first time you're putting yourself out there in a big way since everything happened. People are going to be watching, judging. That's vulnerable." "I don't know how to be vulnerable without being weak. Silas taught me that vulnerability is just giving people ammunition." Silas was wrong about a lot of things. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's courage. It's saying, "Here I am, flaws and all, trying anyway." He took her hand. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to show up and do your best. That's all any of us can do." "What if my best isn't good enough?" "Then we learn from it and do better next time. But I've seen you work. I've seen you plan and organize and problem solve. Your best is going to be more than good enough." She leaned against him, breathing slowly, returning to normal. "How do you always know what to say?" "I don't. Half the time I'm making it up, but I mean it, every word." The night before the wedding, Ethan stood in the completed barn and felt something close to awe. The space was beautiful, exposed beams and Edison lights, long tables made from reclaimed wood, a small stage for the band. The walls still smelled of fresh paint and sawdust, but it worked. It was exactly what they'd envisioned. Mara found him there, 2 glasses of whiskey in her hands. She offered him one. "To new beginnings," she said. "To survival. To both." They drank, and the whiskey burned in the best way. "I'm still terrified," Mara admitted. "But it's a different kind of fear, not the paralyzing kind. More like standing at the edge of a high dive. Scary, but exciting. That's exactly what this is. A leap. And we're taking it together." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the kind of Wyoming autumn day that made you forget winter existed. The couple arrived early, nervous and excited, and Mara immediately put them at ease with her calm efficiency and genuine warmth. Ethan watched her work and saw someone completely in her element, moving through the space like she'd been doing this for years instead of hours. The ceremony was beautiful. The couple cried during their vows. The guests danced until midnight, their laughter echoing across the valley. Several people asked for business cards, wanted to book their own events. And when the bride pulled Mara aside to thank her, tears streaming down her face, saying it was the most perfect day of her life, Mara finally allowed herself to believe they'd done it. When the last guest left and the caterers had cleaned up, Ethan and Mara sat on the porch steps, exhausted and exhilarated. "We did it," Mara said, wonder in her voice. "First of many." "You think so?" "I know so. This is just the start." She laid her head on his shoulder. "Thank you." "For what?" "For believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. for seeing potential where I only saw wreckage, for loving me through all of it. That's not something you thank someone for. That's just what love is. Over the next months, bookings increased steadily. Small at first, birthday parties, anniversary dinners, intimate gatherings, then larger events, corporate retreats, holiday parties. By November, they were booked solid through the following summer, and Mara was already fielding inquiries for the year after that. The money wasn't huge, but it was steady. Enough to make the loan payments, cover expenses, start paying back the neighbors who'd invested. Enough to feel like they weren't drowning anymore, like maybe, just maybe, they were actually going to make it. Winter came again, a year after Mara had first arrived. The anniversary wasn't lost on either of them. Ethan woke to find Mara standing at the bedroom window, watching snow fall on the rebuilt barn. "You okay?" he asked. Just thinking about how different everything is. A year ago, I was terrified every second of every day, running, hiding, certain I'd never be free. She turned to him, and now look at us. We have a business, a home, a future. It's almost too much to process. You've earned every bit of it. We've earned it. Stop giving me all the credit. She climbed back into bed, curled against him. I'm happy. That's strange to say, but it's true. I'm actually happy. Me too. They decorated for the holidays, not elaborate, just simple lights and a tree in the living room, ornaments that mixed Ethan's childhood collection with new ones they'd picked out together. It felt domestic in a way that should have been boring but wasn't. It felt like home. On Christmas Eve, Frank Holloway and his wife came by with pie. Lonnie brought cookies. Sarah Chen drove out from Cheyenne with a bottle of expensive scotch and news that the last of the legal proceedings from the shooting had been officially closed. No charges, no civil suits, nothing hanging over them anymore. You're free, Sarah said, raising her glass. Legally and completely free. They toasted to that and to survival and to the year that had transformed everything. After everyone left, Ethan found Mara standing by the window again, looking out at the snow-covered land. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned into him. What are you thinking? He asked. That a year ago I was running, desperate, certain I'd never be free, and now I'm here in a home I helped build, with someone who loves me without conditions. Her voice thickened. Sometimes I can't believe it's real, that I get to have this. It's real. We're real. And you don't just get to have this, you earned it, by refusing to give up, by fighting when it would have been easier to surrender. She turned in his arms, looked up at him. The words came before she could second-guess them. Marry me. Ethan blinked. What? Marry me. I know it's fast, I know we've only known each other a year, but I'm done waiting for perfect timing. I want this. I want you. I want to build a life where we're partners in everything, not just business, but in all of it. She was speaking faster now, nervous energy making the words tumble out. And I know marriage is complicated for me, that it carries baggage, but what I had with Silas wasn't a marriage. It was a prison sentence. This would be different. We would be different. Equal. So yes, I'm asking, marry me. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. He thought about all the reasons to wait, to be cautious, to let more time pass. And then he thought about how every day with her had been better than the one before, how she'd become the center of his world without him even noticing. Yes, he said. Absolutely yes. Mara laughed, the sound bright and free, and kissed him hard enough that they stumbled backward, knocking into the Christmas tree and not caring when ornaments fell and rolled across the floor. They planned the wedding for March, giving themselves time to do it right. Mara wanted small and intimate, just the people who'd stood with them through the worst. Ethan agreed, though he secretly enjoyed watching her plan, seeing her excitement build as she chose flowers and debated colors. You're allowed to be excited, he told her one evening as she pored over fabric samples. It feels strange, like I'm tempting fate by being happy about a wedding. Your first wedding was to someone who hurt you. This one is to someone who loves you. They're not comparable. I know that, but old fears don't listen to logic. Then we'll face them together, like everything else. The winter passed in preparation. They renovated Ethan's bedroom, their bedroom now, stripping wallpaper and painting, choosing furniture together, making it a space that belonged to both of them instead of just him. Mara insisted on new bedding, new curtains, removing every trace of the old life. I need it to be ours, she explained, not haunted by the past. They also expanded the business plan, using the winter downtime to prepare for the next season. Ethan designed a website that actually looked professional. Mara built relationships with vendors and caterers, negotiating better rates, establishing partnerships. They hired an accountant to help manage the books properly, and a lawyer, not Sarah, but a local specialist, to handle contracts and liability issues. By February, they had a staff of 3 part-time workers and were interviewing for 2 more. The ranch wasn't just surviving, it was growing, becoming something bigger than either of them had imagined. One cold evening, Mara received a letter. It came in a plain envelope with a Nebraska postmark, and when she opened it, her hand started shaking. "What is it?" Ethan asked. "It's from Silas's mother." She stared at the paper like it might catch fire. "I haven't heard from her since the funeral. She blamed me, called me a murderer in front of everyone." "You don't have to read it." "I need to. I need to know what she wants." The letter was short, 3 paragraphs. Mara read it twice before handing it to Ethan. It was an apology. Silas's mother explained that she'd spent the year going through her son's things, finding journals he'd kept, emails he'd sent to friends, seeing a pattern she'd been blind to while he was alive. The manipulation, the violence, the way he'd fooled everyone, including her. "I was wrong about you," the letter concluded. "My son was troubled in ways I didn't want to see. You did what you had to do to survive. I'm sorry I made that harder. I hope you've found peace." Mara set the letter down, tears streaming silently down her face. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked. "I didn't realize how much I needed that. To have someone from his life acknowledge the truth. To not be called crazy or vindictive, just to be believed." She wiped her eyes. "Does that make me weak? Needing validation from someone who should have protected me better? It makes you human. We all need to be believed, especially about the things that hurt us most." She wrote back that night, a short letter thanking Silas's mother for her honesty and wishing her healing. It was generous, more generous than she had to be, but Mara explained that holding on to anger would only give Silas more power. "I'm choosing to let it go," she said. "Not for her. For me. Because I deserve to be free of all of it." They got married in March, in the barn they'd rebuilt together. It was small, just the people who'd stood with them through the worst. Frank gave Mara away, tears streaming down his weathered face. Sarah served as Mara's maid of honor. Sheriff Hastings stood up as Ethan's best man, a role that surprised everyone, including himself. The ceremony was simple. No elaborate vows, just honest promises to stand together through whatever came next. To choose each other every day. To build a life based on trust and respect rather than control and fear. Mara wore a simple dress, cream-colored, nothing like the elaborate gown she'd worn at her first wedding. Her hair was down, loose curls framing her face. She'd never looked more beautiful. When Ethan kissed his bride, the small crowd cheered. And when Mara turned to face them, her smile was radiant, transformed. This was what freedom looked like, what healing looked like, what love looked like when it was healthy and whole. The reception lasted until dawn, neighbors drinking and dancing and celebrating not just a wedding, but a victory. 2 people who'd refused to be broken, who'd turned pain into purpose, who'd proven that sometimes the best revenge against darkness was simply to build something bright. Spring brought new challenges. A health inspection that flagged some issues they had to correct, fire extinguishers that needed replacing, emergency exit signs that weren't up to code, a grease trap that wasn't properly maintained. They fixed everything within a week, learning as they went. There was also a difficult client, a woman planning her daughter's wedding who wanted everything perfect and changed her mind daily about what perfect meant. Flowers, then no flowers. DJ, then live band. Buffet, then plated service. Mara handled it with patience Ethan didn't know she possessed, gently guiding the woman toward decisions while making her feel heard. "How do you do that?" Ethan asked after a particularly exhausting consultation. "Stay calm when she's being impossible?" "Because I remember what it's like to have no control over anything. She's anxious, wants her daughter's day to be perfect. I can give her that gift, the feeling that she's making good choices, that things will work out." Mara smiled. "Besides, patience is easier when you're not terrified." The event went flawlessly when it finally happened. The mother cried tears of joy, hugged Mara, told everyone she was an angel. They got 3 bookings from that wedding alone. Equipment broke. The commercial refrigerator died the day before a major event, requiring a frantic replacement. A summer storm knocked out power for 6 hours during a corporate retreat, forcing them to improvise with generators and candles. But they handled each crisis, learning, adapting, getting better at anticipating problems before they became disasters. By summer, they hired their first full-time employee, a young woman named Casey who just moved to Red Creek and needed work. She was good with people, quick to learn, and didn't ask uncomfortable questions about the ranch's history. They trained her on setup and breakdown, let her handle some of the smaller events under supervision. "This is growth," Mara said one evening, watching Casey efficiently organize chairs for the next day's party. "We're not just surviving anymore, we're actually thriving." Feels strange, doesn't it, being on solid ground? Terrifying, but good. Like I keep waiting for the floor to drop out, but maybe it won't. Maybe this is just what stable feels like, and I've forgotten. In July, they took their first vacation since opening, just 3 days, but they drove to Yellowstone and hiked and didn't talk about the business at all. It was Mara's idea, and at first Ethan worried about leaving, but Casey and their other staff handled everything perfectly. Standing at the edge of a thermal pool, watching steam rise in the summer air, Mara turned to him. "I want to start trying, for a baby." The conversation they'd had a year ago, coming full circle. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. I'm healthy. We're stable. And I want to build a family with you. Not to replace what was lost, but to create something new, something ours." They started trying in August. It took 4 months. In December, Mara took 3 pregnancy tests, all positive, before she believed it was real. "We're having a baby," she whispered, staring at the tests lined up on the bathroom counter. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind, placed his hand over her still flat stomach. "We're having a baby." She turned in his arms, and he saw joy there, but also fear. What if I'm not good at it? What if I don't know how to be a mother because mine failed so spectacularly? What if... Then we figure it out together, just like everything else. You're going to be an amazing mother, Mara. I've watched you care for everyone who walks through our doors. You've got more love in you than you know what to do with. I'm scared. Me too. But we're doing it anyway. That's what we do. The pregnancy was healthy, but not easy. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion that made running the business harder. But they adjusted, Casey stepping up to take on more responsibilities, Frank's wife helping with administrative work, the whole community rallying around them. Mara stayed active through it all, refusing to be sidelined. She worked events until she was 7 months pregnant, finally stopping only when climbing ladders and moving tables became dangerous. In August, Mara's lawyer called with news about Silas's estate. It had finally been settled after 2 years of legal wrangling. There was money, more than expected. The house he'd owned, the life insurance policy that didn't exclude murder or self-defense, investments she hadn't known about. "It's yours," Sarah explained. "All of it. His family contested, but the law is clear. You're the surviving spouse. Everything he owned passes to you." Mara sat with that information for a long time, one hand on her swollen belly, processing. "What do you want to do?" Ethan asked. "I don't want his money. It feels tainted, like accepting it means he still has power over me." She was quiet for a moment, then looked up with sudden clarity. "I'm setting up a fund for women leaving abusive situations, shelter costs, legal fees, relocation money, whatever they need to get out and stay out. Every penny he made through intimidation and control gets used to free people like me. That's perfect. It's not perfect, but it's something. It's turning poison into medicine, and maybe," her voice caught, "maybe it means something good came from all that pain, that other women won't have to suffer the way I did." The foundation launched in October, operated through Sarah's firm. They called it Second Chance Ranch, linking it directly to their story. Mara did interviews, local papers first, then regional, then a national magazine that wanted to feature her journey. She was 8 months pregnant during the photo shoot, standing in front of the rebuilt barn, one hand on her belly, the other holding Ethan's hand. She was nervous about the exposure, worried about judgment, but she pushed through. "If my story helps even one woman see there's a way out, it's worth it," she told Ethan the night before the magazine article published. The response was overwhelming. Donations flooded in, not just from wealthy donors, but from everyday people who sent $10, $20, whatever they could spare. Women reached out sharing their own stories, thanking Mara for her courage. Some came to the ranch, wanting to volunteer, to be part of something bigger than their own survival. The ranch became more than an event space. It became a symbol. Proof that you could be broken and still rebuild. That trauma didn't have to define you. That there was life, good life, on the other side of fear. Their daughter was born in November, 3 years and a week after Mara first arrived at the ranch. Labor was long, 18 hours, but healthy. When the doctor placed the baby in Mara's arms, she looked down at the tiny face and wept. "She's perfect," Mara whispered. "She is," Ethan agreed, touching his daughter's impossibly small hand. They named her Hope. Hope Jackson Cole, honoring both the future and the past. Mara proved to be a natural mother despite her fears, patient and attentive, learning as she went, making mistakes and forgiving herself for them. Ethan watched her cradle their daughter and saw the final pieces of healing fall into place. This was what Silas had tried to take from her, the chance to love and be loved without fear. And here she was, doing it anyway, proving that trauma didn't have the last word. The first months were exhausting. Sleep came in fragments. The business didn't stop for new parents, and they juggled feedings and events with help from Casey and a rotating cast of neighbors who showed up with meals and offers to babysit. One night, when Hope was 3 months old and finally sleeping for more than 2 hours at a stretch, Mara and Ethan collapsed on the couch together. "We're really doing this," Mara said. "All of it. The business, the baby, the whole life." "Having regrets?" "Not even a little. Exhausted? Yes. Covered in spit up? Definitely. But not regrets." She looked at him. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd turned me away that first day?" "Sometimes. Usually when I'm up at 3 a.m. changing diapers." He smiled to show he was joking. "Honestly, I think we both would have survived. You would have found another place, another way out. I would have sold the ranch eventually, moved on. But we wouldn't have this specific life, this specific happiness, and I can't imagine anything better." "Me either." By the time Hope turned 1, the ranch was operating at full capacity. They'd expanded to include overnight accommodations, 4 small cabins built on the property, rustic but comfortable, perfect for wedding parties or corporate groups who wanted to extend their stay. Mara taught cooking classes on weekends when she wasn't caring for Hope. Ethan offered design seminars, helping people reimagine their own spaces. They brought in guest instructors, yoga teachers, painters, writers, turning the ranch into a genuine retreat center. The mortgage was paid off ahead of schedule. The loans were cleared. They employed 8 people full-time now and twice that in seasonal help. The ranch that had been dying when Ethan inherited it was now a success story featured in business journals and tourism magazines. But more than success, it was home. They'd built something that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. Something that welcomed people without making them feel like strangers. Something that proved beauty could grow from ashes if you were willing to do the work. On a warm September evening, 4 years after Mara first arrived, they sat on their porch watching Hope toddle around the yard, chasing fireflies she couldn't quite catch. She had Ethan's eyes and Mara's determination, already showing signs of the person she'd become. "You know what I just realized?" Mara said. "What's that?" "I'm happy, not content, not surviving. Actually genuinely happy. The kind of happy I didn't think was possible for people like me." Ethan set down his coffee, looked at his wife, because she was his wife now, legally and truly and completely, and saw someone who'd grown into herself in ways that seemed miraculous. She'd gained weight, healthy curves from pregnancy and good food, and not being afraid all the time. Her hair was longer, her smile easier. She took up space without apologizing, spoke her mind without flinching, made decisions without seeking permission. She was magnificent. "I'm happy too," he said. "You did that. You made this place feel like it was worth saving. We did that. Together. Stop trying to give me all the credit. Force of habit, you're pretty incredible. So are you, even if you still can't cook worth a damn." They laughed, and the sound carried across the valley, mixing with Hope's delighted squeals and the evening sounds of the ranch settling in for night. Horses in the pasture, wind in the grass, the distant hum of Casey and the other staff closing up the barn after an event. Later, after Hope was asleep and they were lying in bed together, Mara rolled to face him. "I've been thinking about expanding, maybe opening a second location someday, helping other failing ranches reinvent themselves. We could share what we've learned, build a network of places like this. That's ambitious. We've done harder things." "Can't argue with that." He kissed her forehead. "Let's do it. Whatever you want, we'll figure it out. Together. Always together." They fell asleep like that, two people who'd found each other at the end of everything and built a beginning from the wreckage. The years continued to pass, each one adding layers to their story. Hope grew, joined by a brother 2 years later, a boy they named Matthew, after Ethan's grandfather. The ranch expanded to include the second location Mara had dreamed about, then a third. Second Chance Ranch, the foundation, grew exponentially, helping hundreds of women escape situations like Mara's. There were hard days still. Mara's nightmares never completely disappeared, though they became less frequent. Ethan still caught himself mourning Jackson, wishing his brother could have seen what the ranch became. But they learned to hold grief and joy simultaneously, understanding that both were part of being fully alive. On the 5th anniversary of that terrible night when everything burned, they held a private ceremony on the hill behind the house. Not to celebrate the violence, but to acknowledge what they'd survived and what they'd built from it. They planted a tree, an aspen that would grow tall and strong, its roots spreading wide, connecting to other aspens in an underground network of support. "For resilience," Mara said as they patted dirt around the sapling, "and for remembering that we're stronger together than apart." The children helped, Hope carefully sprinkling water while Matthew mostly just played in the mud. It was imperfect and messy and beautiful. As the sun set over the ranch, their home, their legacy, Ethan pulled Mara close and looked out at everything they'd created. The buildings they'd raised from ash, the business they'd built from desperation, the family they'd formed from trauma and hope and stubborn determination to prove that darkness didn't get the final word. "We made it," he said. "We did." "What do you think comes next?" Mara smiled, watching their children play. "I don't know. But whatever it is, we'll face it together. That's all we've ever needed." And standing there on that hill, surrounded by love and life, and the physical proof that people could be broken and still rebuild themselves into something stronger, Ethan understood a fundamental truth. Survival wasn't about avoiding damage. It was about refusing to let that damage become your entire story. They had survived, but more than that, they had built a life worth surviving for. The ranch stood solid beneath them. No longer dying but thriving, no longer a burden but a gift they'd given themselves and each other. The land that had seen so much struggle now witnessed joy, laughter, love freely given and gratefully received. Winter would come again. It always did. But they'd be ready, together, wrapped in warmth of their own making, secure in the knowledge that they'd faced the worst and come through it not just intact, but transformed. The woman who'd arrived terrified and broken had become someone who helped others find their own strength. The man who'd been drowning in obligation had learned to build a future instead of just preserving a past. And together, they'd created something neither could have managed alone. A place where people came to celebrate beginnings, where love was honored and fear was faced down, where every event held in that barn was a small victory against the darkness that tried to consume them. That was their legacy. Not just the physical structures or the successful business, or even the foundation helping women escape abuse. It was the proof, written in every board they'd nailed and every meal they'd shared and every morning they'd chosen each other again, that hope was not naive and love was not weakness, and survival was just the beginning of what was possible. They had stopped running, they had chosen to stand, and in standing together, they had built something that would outlast them both. A testament to resilience, a sanctuary for celebration, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was always a path forward if you were brave enough to take it. The fire had taken so much, but from those ashes, they had grown something beautiful. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. It was